these papers I have, by the way, if you're interested in any particular paper, email me and I'll send you the, or you, if you can't find it yourself, send you the PDF. But the conclusion is that there's insertions and deletions in the genomes of bacteria, but the net difference is deletional. That is, the bacterial genomes are becoming shorter and shorter on average over time. And you might say, well, that's good because the bacteria we don't want around anyways. Well, no, you do. There are lots of beneficial bacteria. But the bad news is this, is that as bacteria loses genes, they become more and more pathogenic because they become more and more dependent on a host to provide the nutrients that once they produce themselves. So we're living in a world right now with a lot of pathogenic bacteria that weren't originally supposed to be like that. But it's a result not of evolution, but of devolution. That is, the deterioration of their information. So now this is happening in the bacterial world. What's happening in the larger section here? Where am I here? Oh yes, one other example. We've worked a lot with bacteria, but we've also worked a lot with the fruit fly, also known as Drosophila. And here's again the abstract for a paper, and final sentence, I'll read it because it might be a little small for you to see. It says, these results strongly suggest that the high rate of DNA loss is a general feature of Drosophila and not a peculiar property of a particular stretch of DNA in a particular species group. In other words, they're saying this is a general problem with the fruit fly, is that it's losing its DNA, which should be absolutely no surprise to any normal scientist, because we know no information storage media is perfect. All of them will run down. We have a massive information deterioration problem. That's a prediction under intelligent design. It's totally opposite of what Darwinian theory requires, which is a steady increase in information. So I looked at 1, 2, and 4. What will happen is you lose information. Intelligent design, the idea that there was an intelligent creator behind life and everything we've seen, predicts as you lose information, you'll lose diversity. Entire phyla have gone extinct. The fossil record seems to show that in the past there were more phyla available living on the earth than there are today. And phyla is a major taxonomic group. Rarity of transitional fossils. I already discussed that one. I'll show you the model. Statistically significant levels of functional information is what you would predict if intelligent design is behind organic life. And that's precisely what we're seeing when we apply the equations that define functional information and measure that to simple things like proteins. Protein families, as I showed earlier on in this presentation. So the reality right now, 2011, Scientific American had an article that basically stated that scientists don't have a clue how life began. The reason is, we've sort of got a little inkling of the reason today, is it's difficult to code for the first genes. And that's an understatement. But what scientists are going to find, I think there needs to be a next major transition in Darwinian theory into the information age, and it really hasn't come there, but it's starting now. Yeah, they're starting to look at functional information. What they're going to find is that the problem doesn't end once you get life form up and running and replicating. Because we've got thousands of novel protein families that need to be discovered in evolutionary search. And the amount of information required to code for these makes it impossible to find them in evolutionary search. But by intelligent coding, no problem. So what I'm saying here, this is not an argument where we don't know what did it, therefore God did it. What I'm saying is that the fingerprints of intelligence are all over biological life. We know what can produce information. You do it every day, all the time. Every time you open your mouth and start talking, every time you send a text, you're producing information, statistically significant levels. We know intelligent agents can produce functional information. There is nothing else out there that can do that. Nothing when we run the test. There's different ways you can test it, either through genetic algorithms or in the lab. Both of them falsify this idea that natural processes produce that level of information. So we have a positive candidate here for the origin of life. Here's another basically, Eugene Koonin, evolutionary biologist, has decided that the probability of getting the first life form is so small, it's not going to happen unless there are an infinite number of universes, and that's his solution to this problem. What he suggests is that there's an infinite number. And more recently, that was a paper published in Biology Direct in 2007, those quotes. But more recently, in his book, The Logic of Chance, he develops that idea. One other paper I want to bring to your attention. This paper here, published in Cell Biology International, says that chance and necessity, which are the two major options in natural processes, will not explain the origin of life. And why? The last sentence of the abstract says this: all known metabolism is cybernetic. That is, it is programmatically and algorithmically organized and controlled. What they're saying here is that the genetic information is essentially computer code. That's what it is. Extremely highly sophisticated computer code. And that kind of information we only see in 2 other places, the kind of information you're seeing in the genomes of life. Human languages and human written software. And now we see it in our genetic, in the genomes of life. Genomic similarity. In Darwinian theory, you'll have similarity due to common descent. Similarity is evolution-based. In design theory, similarity is due to common designer. That is, you'll have same components used in different things because you have a common designer. Using the common laws of physics. The laws of physics are operative for all life forms. So you're going to see similarities in life forms regarding proteins, protein foldings. And common functions. Functions that are needed for all life. Replication, for example. Translation, transcription, replication, those are common functions for all life. So the two models, Darwinian model starts with a simple life form, branches out into many life forms. The intelligent design model starts with several, each of which diversifies. You start off with the Darwinian model, minimum disparity, in the intelligent design model, maximum disparity, that the greatest number of different phyla occur at the beginning, not at the end. And that's exactly what we see in the fossil record. It supports the intelligent design model. The second thing is that you'll see minimum genetic information at the beginning, 0, in the Darwinian model. In the intelligent design model, you will require maximum information because you know it's going to deteriorate over time. And over time, in the Darwinian model, it actually increases the information. In the intelligent design model, information decreases. Again, what I'm saying here is that the science, the latest advances in science are supporting the intelligent design model for the origin of life. In other words, what I'm saying here is that there's an intelligent creator behind life. Fingerprints of intelligence all over life. Genomes of life have it all over. Kind of emphasize that. I want to close with just a video here. This is a bacterial flagellum. This is a little molecular machine that runs a whip-like appendage on the end of certain bacteria that repel it from the fluid medium. Can't see it very well there, but each one of these different components are an assembly of different proteins which have different three-dimensional structure that you can use to build things. That's the rotor there, and on the outside is the stator. There's the stator, those white things with the poles coming out from it. So the rotor goes around and around through a collar or a bushing that goes to the cell wall. Then you have this universal joint here, and that little star-shaped thing is actually a tool. That tool is a protein itself, protein complex. Everything you see here, all these different proteins are encoded within that bacterial genome, and the tools needed to build the machine are also encoded within the bacterial genome, the templates. Each one of those little proteins, for example, the things that sort of look vaguely reminiscent of the bowling pin, that would be one protein. You'll see that each one of those proteins has a different three-dimensional structure. The white ones have one structure, the green ones that we saw earlier have a different structure. And all these things are like can be fitted together to build stuff, to build complexes, to build machines. Speeding up the assembly a little bit here. Whole thing's rotating. He's actually in real life rotated thousands of RPM propelled by that little rotary motor. there she goes. Okay, I want to close there. Are there any questions? Yes.
When you showed the graph in the conclusion, like you contrasted Darwinian model and creation model, like time went up on the y-axis.
Yeah.
But earlier when you talked about the fossil records, like wouldn't Darwinian stuff look at it from the x-axis?
That'll be different. Definitely, in that earlier one, the vertical axis represents population, like the population numbers. So when the curve is high, you have a lot of the same time there. Whereas in the other one, its time is the vertical axis. So you get different things depending on which vertical axis.
But with the idea that you start off with like a whole bunch of complex organisms, then all those fossil records would happen at the same time as opposed to what some people think about, like this group of dinosaurs flowed into this group of dinosaurs.
More or less. No, there was one point that I didn't make is that, remember the bell curves? That was the potential diversity of each kind. But the potential diversity of each kind doesn't mean that that'll be completely filled with actual living examples. So you may get one section of that bell curve in the past, another section now. And so what you could have now is life form or partway through. So you might have certain things appearing in the fossil record that may still be alive today, as in the living fossils. But you may have certain organisms today that weren't even around then because that portion of the bell curve had not been filled. You see, the bell curve for a particular type, say for humans, for example, how much variation can you get in humans? Interesting question, but it would be very unethical to experiment. But it wouldn't be surprising that given the amount of variation we can get in animals that we really do a lot of work, such as dogs, we can get probably a very impressive amount of variation in human beings. But most of that has never actually existed. Or maybe it did exist in the past, but doesn't today. We're just not sure. You see, things change over time. Our brain capacities may be getting smaller, for example. There was a paper that came out about a year ago that's saying that suggests that human evolution will not proceed in a forward direction because there are too many bad examples being observed due to the increasing medical knowledge. In other words, the average human is becoming less and less healthy and fit because the mutations are accumulating and they're not being weeded out through natural selection. So those two graphs, to get back to your question, that's not the whole story. If you actually took one of those graphs and offered a third dimension, let's say the earlier ones with bell curves, put a third dimension representing time, you would see that that bell curve would change into maybe more of a shifting blob, but it's still limited by the information which still changes.
That makes
Sort of a little more. I know it's very confusing. Just giving simple things, yes.
I've got lots, but I'll start one at a time. Well, one of the issues I've had when I discussed or say debated with those that believe in evolutionary theory is this what I would call this religion of time that they have. Because the classic example of you take a mechanical watch, you take it apart, shake it, and this is never going to turn into a watch. Well, the response I get is, yeah, given enough time.
Yeah.
And my response to that would always be, doesn't it make sense that the probability of two parts coming together that would never allow it to go any further, aren't the odds of that happening